Thank you for joining us and thank you for being with us. So I put this panel last because I think it's the most interesting and brings a lot of value to startups in the community. In the past year, we've been talking a lot about multinational and startup relations and how that happens. Today, we're going to talk about how to deepen that. If we take that, let's say, to the dating world, we know that there's an interest. We go on a few dates, and both sides want to meet each other. But the tricky part is always to make it official. And today, we're going to talk about what do you do, how to make it official, and when you do, a little bit of tips on what to do when it happens. So we each have your name and title and everything, but please say just quickly about who you are in your organization, what's your position, and what type of technology startups should approach you.
Hi, I'm Eyal. I'm the head of innovation for the Tel Aviv hub. We're looking for startups mostly for passenger cars, including autonomous cars, but really since we're the only outpost of Daimler in Israel, we support all the enterprise, so including trucks, buses, and general enterprise.
I'm Nuri Golan. I'm the managing director of Lear Innovation Ventures in Silicon Valley. So some of you may have heard of Lear Innovation Ventures already, but it's basically we launched it about 6 months ago to do all of our product, process, and business model innovation. But basically, it's engaging with startups, doing partnerships with other technology companies, and I said startups already, but yeah. Most recently, we acquired Zevo, which is a connected services company, which is a big part of our strategy going forward. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that here, but that's me.
Hi everyone, my name is Xavier. I'm the person in charge of relationships with startup companies for the whole Valeo group. So Valeo, we're a tier 1 supplier. We are working in providing solutions for the three revolutions that are reshaping the world of mobility today. So electrification, autonomous driving, and mobility services. And so we are basically looking at partners that are answering to the technological needs in all these areas. There's a lot to do, there's a lot happening, and we're happy to discuss with everyone, providing either technological solutions around this or that could become some customers, like for electric mobility services, for example.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fox. I'm the managing director of Konnect, our Volkswagen Group innovation hub here in Tel Aviv. And yeah, what are we doing? We're connecting, we're matching and looking for startups, for technologies. We're evaluating startups, but we're also like the business development arm of the Volkswagen Group. So for us, it is really about finding innovation, looking for startups and driving it into the group and helping and supporting our Volkswagen Group brands, representing them here. And yeah, just moving forward to become a mobility provider of the future. So we're looking for all kind of technologies that help us in that sense. So definitely connectivity, autonomous driving, ADA, radar, LiDARs, and of course also other topics like Industry 4.0, HR topics, Business 4.0, AI. So it's not limited. For us, it is all about what is the need of the brand. The brand approaches us, and then we go and look for the right partner, connecting them and driving that business.
It's interesting that you said HR and Industry 4.0 because today when we look at OEMs and tier 1s, these big multinationals, we're not only talking about taking things down in the production line, in the hardware, in the software, but it's also how to reshape this organization as we're going to create new types of vehicles. We're going to need to recreate also the organizational type. So speaking of relations, Xavier, please tell us about one successful startup relationship you have as kind of a successful use case and the stage you're at in this relationship.
Sure. So I have a very good story to share with an Israeli startup, actually, so I'm going to focus on that one.
Good one.
We've been working for the past 2 years now with an Israeli startup called Netira. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. It all started from the team that is working in Valeo on thermal management and on HVAC solutions, because the team had the vision that the future of HVAC is really to be able to develop some personalized comfort, so thermal comfort, but comfort in general. And they've been focusing on solutions and ideas on how to improve this comfort by personalization. And at Valeo, we're doing sensors, so in-cabin monitoring, driver monitoring, for example. So we have ways of understanding what's happening inside the cabin. We're also providing HVAC, of course, but also interior lighting. We're working on sound. So we have many ways of changing the environment and trying to make people feel better. But what we were missing was a way to really understand the feelings, the mood, the comfort, level of comfort of the people in the cabin. And for that, we were needing information about physiological data, so basically heartbeat, respiration rate, and we didn't have a solution for that. And 2 years ago...
but we know the technology, but what made it successful with that startup specifically?
It's a combination, you know, the startup had the missing technological brick, and we had this vision and this use case, and you know, the technology alone, it's very interesting for sure, but okay, that doesn't reach a market necessarily. And for us, we had the use case, but we needed the technology. So really, the combination of both was the opportunity to create something new that had extra added value for both us and the startup. And that was really what created the initial spark that allowed us to start working together. And after we met them, it took like 6 months to really go to the POC phase, until we managed to put the technology in a car and show the demo live during CES, so it was 1.5 years ago, and be able to demonstrate the capabilities of this solution to different people, OEMs, and future customers.
Okay, good. Good luck to many more of those. Steph, what do you think is the biggest gap? Can I call you Steph? Is that okay?
Sure.
What do you think is the biggest gap in the relationship between multinationals and startups?
Still laughing.
It's okay. I was thinking, as I said, I'm like, Steph, but I don't know if I...
Stephanie, that's
yeah,
fine.
it's good.
That's fine. Okay. So biggest gap, I wouldn't call it a gap, because we all know there's a big differentiation. And there's a differentiation because it has to be, just because of the size, the culture, and the processes. For me, it is generally 3 things. It is time, it is communication, and implementation. So if I look at the time, we know things in the corporate take time. There are processes, regulations, there are committees, and we know it can be very, very tough for
because
startups.
Sometimes it's a little bit too much time.
Sometimes it's a little bit too much time from the Israeli side and from the startup side. We know that. What we're doing is, and this is like your question, how we're filling the gap, and what we can do as Konnect here being in the market is we can actually really accelerate, support, we can translate, and we're here for the startups to be being approached, being accessible, and we can explain. I think often it is not really the issue of the time, it is more the intransparency of the timing. And once you close that gap, once you communicate what the holdup maybe is, to also find out what is currently happening, that helps a startup to manage their expectations. Therefore, we're absolutely, as Konnect, we are the pushy ones. We are bringing in the Israeli chutzpah into our organization.
We need that.
And that's what we need, and we see first results there. Secondly, when it comes to communication, again, it is linked to time, but the communication is also a cultural thing. In a startup, decisions are being made much quicker. For us, it is not just one person. It's a committee, it's usually different business units, and it needs again, just time, and then also the transparency. So when it comes to communication, I also feel, as a German living in Israel, it isn't even that slow in that sense. So it is also about patience, and we speak with the startups. When it comes to implementation, again, they're looking at a corporate, and that we are, as a Volkswagen Group, producing 10 million cars a year, looking at how many, where we are in the world, how we're structured, 12 brands managing, all of that. It is very clear that for us, it is about the mass market, it is about solutions for the customer in the long term. So implementation also means when we look at just testing and piloting, we're looking for solutions that can be implemented in the long term. Therefore, we also ask to look into that. So those are the three key topics where we just see a differentiation. And like you said, in any good relationship, you have to get to know each other and also understand each other. So the better we understand the needs of the startup, the better they can adjust to those needs and the other way around. And then, the dating will be better. And
Communication is key to any successful relationship. So you all must know it doesn't matter if it's business or pleasure. Communication is key. Okay, so we're talking a lot about pilots, about POCs, about testing, about MVPs. I think in 2017, 18, 19, we've been seeing a lot of those. My biggest question now for the end of 19 and going into 2020, how do we take that down to the production line? How do we push from a POC to an SOP, to a start of production? And Nuri, I would like you to start as someone who actually went into production and was bought by a tier one and now working in one. What's the best way to push to that direction?
Get acquired. Done. No. I mean, that's obviously one way, but it's not gonna work for every single startup. I'll piggyback kind of off the trend here, which I think communication is really important. If you're working with a startup very early, or from the startup's perspective, if you're working with a big corporate very early on, you should first of all make sure you're working with a corporate that fits the strategy that you have to get to market. If you're working with a company that doesn't really have any intention of ever bringing it to market, then you're probably not going to have a good relationship with them down the road. So it goes back to communication and making sure that your actual strategies are aligned and that there's actually a path to market, and you should do that early on. Maybe not before you initially engage on a pilot, but right after you start.
So what's the question? Are you planning to actually hit the market with this product? What's the right question to ask in the beginning in order to know that? Because they won't say, oh no, we're just trying to have fun in the end of the day.
Well, you have to learn the organization and you have to get to know them and understand what their goals are. Because if you just listen to what they say all the time, they might not tell you exactly what's going on behind closed doors. So a little
Corporate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit is intuition, and a little bit is building a relationship with the company and getting to know them and look at their product roadmap and look at the things that they're talking about doing in the future. And if you see a strong alignment there, then that's the company you should be focused on working with. Because there's plenty of companies, I'm sure we've all done pilots with startups that we really didn't have any intention of taking them to market. It just was an interesting concept and we wanted to keep an eye on it. And for the startup, that can be killer because you spend time and resources on it and then ends up that nothing comes out of it.
It's not only that, they believe it. So some have like, oh, he said it was interesting. And for Americans, saying interesting, it means that it's not. So there's a lot of gap there, I think.
That's a tip for all Israeli entrepreneurs, to learn what American passive aggressiveness means and learn that every American is going to tell you, oh, sounds great, but probably doesn't ever want to see you again. So as half and half, I can tell you that I was able to bridge that gap, but a lot of people have difficulty.
Okay, so a line in the beginning, that's what you said is the best way to bring it to SOP.
Yeah, and then some of it is just making sure you have a product that fits their go-to-market strategy as well.
Good. Eyal, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, actually, specifically, I think we've seen a lot of POCs where next steps haven't been defined in terms of, okay, what's going to happen after a successful completion of the POC. So recently, we've been seeing more and more startups actually insist on defining next steps, which is a step in the right direction, but it's not enough. If you actually want to succeed with an OEM, you really need to understand which car line and which specific model they're targeting your technology for, and then work your way backwards from there. A lot of POCs actually only prove some of the technology, but not all of it. So sometimes it's actually okay to have a POC as another POC as a next step for the POC, but the startup really needs to have the transparency of the key milestones for the development cycle in order to actually get into the vehicle.
Okay, so know the series, know what they're planning, and also know that if it's successful, what is going to be the next step. That's the main...
Yeah, and know which car line and what are the key dates for the car line.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah. The thought of car lines. Yes.
That's sometimes difficult, though, because some tier ones will keep that information close. They might not want to tell you which car lines they're going after. So that's kind of tricky.
I agree. It's sometimes it's sensitive. They won't give you full transparency into the product, but if you build the rapport and the relationship, eventually you can understand and just key dates. No, don't give me a model. Don't give me just key dates.
Yeah.
Stephanie, now the other way around. If we're looking at a good idea, good team type of startup, what time should they start approaching you? At what stage?
Well, it's very difficult because generally speaking, we're here to really also see trends and what's happening. We as Konnect, we are part of the Volkswagen Group Innovation, reporting directly into the R&D arm of the Volkswagen Group. Saying that, it means we're part of also the future research and the future trends, and we know those colleagues. So we're very much interested in also understanding and seeing where's the market heading towards, what are new ideas. So generally speaking, I would say we're always open to speak, to learn from that. At the same time, we know when it comes to implementation and to POCs, we have to have a product to test it. What we've learned though is sometimes it is a little bit difficult to do that directly with the headquarters. What we do in order, again, to fill the gap or to maybe speed up things is we're connected to also the Volkswagen Group Innovation Centers and R&D centers. There we can also do testing much easier and much quicker. So this is a combination when it comes to POCs and implementation. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest challenge we all have is like from first idea to POC and then implementation and scaling. So we're, as Konnect, just being here 1 year, we've learned a lot what is working and what is not working. I don't like to say in general it needs to be a certain stage. So ideally, yes, we have a product that we can test that makes it much easier for us. We also look into cooperating, of course, with tier ones. So we see that there are often very, very great technologies which we can't implement as an automotive manufacturer directly. Therefore, the tip is also to collaborate with tier ones. That just helps, and they have other possibilities than we have, maybe.
Yeah, do you all agree on that? Do you have other thoughts on what is the best stage to approach you?
Yeah, I think it really depends on what they're looking for. So we see a lot of really super early stage startups who are just looking for idea validation, just to see if it makes sense, if they actually solve a real pain. And they don't have an expectation for a POC. So that, I think that's valid, and a lot of times they change the idea, they pivot. But to actually do, if they want a POC, usually for a technology that goes into the vehicle, from my perspective, they actually the technology needs to be ready to be demoed in a vehicle. Not in a lab, not in an office, in a vehicle. That's the right time to come to us.
And do you think the industry is ready to fail there? They're going to test it in vehicles. Are they ready for it also to not succeed?
Well, I think if they're coming for a demo, then it has to succeed, right? They're not going to show us a demo that fails.
Not the startup side, I mean the industry side.
The industry side, yeah, I think we're ready to see. And I think there's a general understanding today that in order to be innovative, one has to allow, or a company has to allow its employees to fail. So we're seeing that at Daimler. We have a program called Leadership 2020, which works on empowering employees to actually fail into projects to fail. But at the same time, I think when you talk about innovation and failure and coming from the startup world, I think we're talking about a trend that we're seeing from 1999 to today, where the cost of actually founding or launching a startup has gone down by 99%. So it used to cost about $5 million in 1999 because you needed to buy Unix servers and you needed to pay licenses. Until today, where everything is on the cloud and you really need like $50,000 to start. And I think for our industry to actually follow that model is going to be very difficult because a car costs between $1 billion and $6 billion to manufacture. So I don't see us failing in manufacturing a car or taking that risk. But in terms of feature, definitely. Once we have over-the-air updates and the car becomes a hardware platform that just allows various services, we can definitely see more and more failed services in the vehicle. And in a software update, they just go away, and we act more like smartphones.
What do you guys think? Is the industry ready to fail?
I would say I have a similar answer, but when it comes to innovation, really early stages, it's okay to fail. I think it's okay to try. And what we want to do is experiment as fast as possible and go to the conclusion that this is going to work or not work as quick as possible, because we don't want to spend time or money for nothing. So we are trying at Valeo to use this kind of startup approach, which is try fast, fail fast, and then try again a different way. So in that case, it's really fine. The problem comes when you're approaching an OEM, because when you are pushing a solution to an OEM and that you say you think it's a good solution and you want to convince them that it's a good solution, then you're not allowed to fail, because we somehow are guaranteeing the safety of the products that we're selling. We also have a liability on these products, and in this case, it's not possible to fail. And again, I think the reason why we do POCs is not just doing POCs for the sake of testing and seeing and not going anywhere after, is really try to de-risk the technology that we are looking in the startup. So really make sure that we are confident about the industrialization, about the market, and bring it to a customer, and make sure that the customer, when he says, okay, that's a great product, then we're able to deliver.
Maybe building on that, because is the industry ready to fail? I wouldn't really say that. The question is, are the managers ready to forgive failures of their employees? So this is kind of, because I feel failure is really a cultural thing, and we learn that here in the startup scene. And what we do and what we see is when we have executives coming out to Israel, that they learn how much the failure culture can help to drive innovation, and that is the mindset, and that should be the mindset. So bringing it into the positive way, because we as an industry, of course, we don't want to fail. Like we want to produce the best car, the best user experience, and we want to drive towards the future. When it comes to testing, POCs, smaller topics, we need to allow, and our managers need to allow us to test things, and that can fail. But this is internally a culture, and we see within the Volkswagen Group we're getting there, and we see what impact we have as Konnect, that we bring out those managers to come us to learn from the Israeli startup scene,
Yeah, this
and
is
that
something
they bring
they're
it back.
all
So
absorbing from here.
So that is something. Sure, how it is in other companies,
Cool.
but yeah.
So when deepening the relationship, Nuri, I want to pick your brain on this, because I hear a lot of POCs, and sometimes OEMs and tier ones, I hear they're paying for a POC and they think they're paying for the IP. What's your tips on for the startup hat, put it on 1 second, as someone in the industry, what's your tip on what to be aware of and how to do it correctly in IP relations, and what to expect in both sides?
So I have to be a little bit careful here, but I do know it.
Don't be.
I do know it kind of from both sides, but so it's a bit of a culture change for OEMs, tier ones, all the big companies here, because in the past they were used to paying for something and then they would own it. You know, if it was a piece of software that was being developed even, it was like, okay, we're going to pay you to develop this and then it's ours. And even if you look at some of the supplier agreements, and if you're a startup and you do a POC, sometimes you'll get this supplier agreement and it'll be probably 100 pages long, and buried somewhere in there in the fine print, it's going to say anything you develop is ours. So first of all, look out for that.
Read what you sign on.
Yes. And some of it, you know, sometimes you just say as a startup, whatever, they don't actually intend to own what we're going to do here. But again, you know, our lawyer from the startup is in the back here. Hi, Ariella. So she would kill me if I would sign something like that. But be careful what you sign up for. And then it goes back to really, I think, communication. Because if you are signing up for a POC where it's a proof of concept and you're just demonstrating a concept, then that should be communicated and it should be okay. You should say, hey, we're just showing you the fruits of our labor. You're not paying for any actual development. And as long as that's clear up front, then everything should be fine. But if you don't have that conversation and they think that we're paying you $100,000 to go develop something, then it can get tricky. And they might come back and say, well, you know, we should have some very preferential rights here because we supported you. We taught you how to get to automotive. How to build an automotive-grade product.
So when you demonstrate, no IP, but when you co-develop something together, there should be discussions of the IP during the contract.
Co-development's a whole nother animal, right? Because then there's resources being deployed or expended by the corporate as well. And then they're certainly going to want, you know, if we enter into a joint development agreement with a startup right now, we're definitely going to want some rights, or we're definitely going to want to maintain ownership of whatever we develop. So that's a trickier conversation. You'll definitely need to have some cross-license agreement or some relationship between the companies. But again, it goes back to just making sure it's very clear what each side is doing, what's the piece that you're doing together? And if you eventually do take this to market, talk about what's going to happen. Don't leave that conversation until after it's done, because it'll get very messy.
Cool. So following up on that, from Xavier and Stephanie, I would love to hear in 1.5 minutes max. What type of interesting processes did you put in line in order to do these communications? What process did you create for your side and the startup side to better work together?
I think the one important thing is to protect the startups from our own internal organization. Tier 1s and OEMs, the same. We are successful because of the industrial processes that we put in place. They are very efficient for what we're doing every day, but they could be a killer when it comes to startup cooperations. So what we've put in place in Valeo is a whole process, and believe me, it's taking a bit of time because it's not easy to convince everyone, but just to soften the processes when it comes to purchasing, when it comes to legal, IP discussions are part of it. When it comes to finance, like how are we going to pay the startups? But startups don't want to be paid 60 days from the end of the POC that was already 3 months. So we have to really make the people in the organization understand that the needs are different, the way of working is different, and we need to have specific processes for that. So we've been working on that for the past year, and it's quite efficient, and it's also reassuring for the startups when we tell them, okay, you will not have to go to the normal processes. We put in place some fast track system. Nice. The second thing is, again, we were talking about communication or culture. It's very important that the people in Valeo understand the way startup think, the way startup works, and that they can, speak the same language. And so for that, we're experimenting a few different things, but one good example, and it's coming back to the example of Netira, the reason also why this cooperation is successful is because the team that is working with them is actually not inside the normal Valeo organization, but has been taken out of Valeo. So the whole team is actually in a startup incubator in one of the most famous engineering schools in France. And they are acting like a startup in the incubator. So they have different processes. They are applying agile methodologies. They have a certain freedom compared to what innovation teams would have if they were still part of the main organization. And that allows them to be quicker, more responsive, more agile, and it works very well when talking to startups.
I once met a Japanese OEM, and he said he had to go to the Valley in order to do innovation because it was the farthest away from Japan. So he needed to be as far as possible from the headquarters. Stephanie, what about processes in Konnect and Volkswagen Group in general?
Yeah, so in order to deepen the relationship with the startups, we think, yes, one is maybe protecting and supporting the startup, but on the other hand, we also believe in, when it comes to deepen a relationship, face-to-face and B2B meetings with the brand experts, because then you have the commitment, you have the interest, and then you have the experts and the great minds coming together and you bring them together. So this helps at the very early stage when we say, okay, are we going to do it or are we not going to do it? And then we also come in and support throughout the process. This is, again, it goes back to the scaling and how we can support. But we, as Konnect, we're not just connecting and initiating. We help through the process where we say onboarding, yes, with the contracts, the NDAs, the purchasing process, how to apply on the supplier platform. And then also attending workshops and meetings in Wolfsburg. So our team travels to Wolfsburg or to Ingolstadt to attend those workshops, to be in the loop and to understand if certain gaps occur and how we can support further, and also to translate there. So for us, this is really building a relationship from end to end, from the initiation, identification, throughout the first meeting, the dating, and then signing the contract and the implementation. So this is, I think it is important not just to protect, but actually bringing together the people and having them working together.
Cool. So this is a question to all of you. So in the past year, there's a lot of centers opening up here, a lot of tech scouters, but you guys have organizations that are spread out throughout the world. Who should the startup be talking to? 30 seconds.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that a startup that is going to go through a process with us is going to talk to people, engineers from R&D, is going to talk to IP lawyers from legal, they're going to talk to purchasing department, and they're going to talk to our venture and M&A team. So I think they have to find a champion, someone who actually sees the full picture and can help them with all different branches of the organization that they're going to work with. And I think it's really easy to identify the champion because the value that they provide should be blatantly apparent. And if it's not apparent, they need to find a different sponsor.
I agree with that. I would only add that sometimes there's a feeling that if things aren't moving fast enough, sometimes you want to go over the head of the local contact. And I would say that's usually a bad idea because, first of all, you're not going to make any friends if you're going over people's heads. And it's not to say that you should take no for an answer necessarily, but if you're not getting a lot of response, then maybe there's just not a lot of interest, and you can spend your time better working with a different company. But at the end of the day, it's about building a relationship with the organization, and you want to make sure that the person that's closest to you is there in your corner, and at the end of the day, they can help you navigate the organization you're trying to get into.
So I agree also the best contact point is really the owner of the topic that the startup is working on. But it's not always easy to identify. So in the meantime, I'm the obvious person to connect to anyone in the organization. And,
That's a good answer.
Yeah, and also I have the chance, we're a global company, so I have the chance to have people all over the world connecting with startups and different areas of expertise, including here in Israel. We have two great people working for us, and I think everyone should know them here.
Yeah, very obvious. Speaking to Konnect, of course. That's why we're here. So definitely reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn, and we will also, I would like to announce that we have an upcoming challenge for Volkswagen We, our mobility platform. So startups, we're looking for connectivity solutions together with smart home solutions. So this is a new approach. We're looking for use cases. We will share more on our LinkedIn page. Follow us, Volkswagen Group Innovation Tel Aviv. That's who we are. We're Konnect. We also have an email address. We have a website. So anything you want to know, you can find there. That's the best way. Approach us. We're here. We're here for the startups, and we're here for the Volkswagen Group brands, moving forward and bringing Volkswagen Group to the next level.
Last question, 30 seconds. So I believe it's all about chemistry, and you talked about it before. It's bringing people together face to face. Because in the end of the day, if there's no good chemistry, you won't do business together. It's not a logo and a logo, it's a human and a human. Contradict me. Have you ever done business with an arrogant startup?
Do you know that Daimler invested in Elon Musk in 2010? I didn't do business with him, but my boss did.
Good question. Good answer.
I mean, it won't necessarily stop you from engaging with a startup, but it definitely doesn't help. But at the end of the day, you have to be mature enough as someone who has to explore, a lot of different types of people to make sure that you're looking at the right technology. So I wouldn't say it's going to be a killer, but it definitely doesn't help.
Nuri, you're becoming politically correct. Yes.
So we often meet arrogant startups, like the first time we meet them, arrogant people, they think they have the best solution and they want to do everything by themselves. And I think it's a good start because honestly, you wouldn't want to work with someone who's not convinced that they have the best solution. But then as time goes, it's better if things are changing a little bit. And what we experimented is that, very often the people, they're like, no, we don't need Valeo. We're going to talk directly to the OEMs. We want to keep the whole value and we don't need you. And then 6 months, 1 year later, they're coming back saying, okay, we've talked to OEMs. They say you have to partner with the tier one. And then we've found out the complexity of the industry and the regulations and everything, and we really need you. And then that's when we can start to work together.
I was just wondering, because arrogant versus confident, and I've learned that in the US, confidence and arrogant is something different than in Israel. So I haven't really met arrogant startups here or anything. I feel, yes, they're very pushy and there is a chutzpah approach, and also they're very confident, but that's why we're here. That's what we like. So there needs to be a chemistry, I agree, but generally I think it is not either or. So yeah, being open for it and looking behind it, and confident startups, we like very pushy, and we're open for that, and we're learning from that.
Okay, so you guys heard it. They're open for business. They're open for pushy people who know that they have a good product in their hand and they want to get it into vehicles. This was the last panel. What we're going to do now is have a sunset cocktail all together in the demo field. So I want to personally thank everyone in this room for this marvelous day.